welcome back to Cardiac Radio for Teens. I'm Bia, and for those of you who don't know, Cardiac Radio for Teens is a place where teens can come together with other teens to learn about Spiritists, teachings, and topics in a way that makes more sense to us and that we can relate to personally. While reading the Spirits book together, last week we left off, we've been talking about in the chapter, talking about the return to spirit life for a while, and in that chapter we just started the part about childhood, and that's where we started off. That's what we started at the end of last week, so that's where we'll continue off today. So let's pick up right where we left off. Question 381. With the death of the child, does the spirit immediately regain its former vigor? The spirit said, it should, since it has been disencumbered from its physical envelope. Nevertheless, it does not regain its former lucidity until the separation is complete. That is, until there is no connection between the spirit and the body at all. So the question was asking, when a child dies, does the spirit immediately gain its former vigor? And if you look up the definition of vigor, it means strength and good health. So we're talking about, right after the child dies, does the spirit gain all that good health and strength that it had when it was just in the spirit world? And the spirit said that, yeah, it should, because it disconnected from the physical body. But this does not happen, they're saying, until it's completely disconnected, until the body and the spirit are completely separated. Question 382. Does the incarnate spirit suffer from the constraint imposed by the imperfection of its organs during childhood? So during childhood, since the organs aren't fully developed, this is what the question is saying, since the organs aren't fully developed, they're asking, does the incarnate spirit suffer because it's not fully developed, because the body isn't completely developed yet? Is the spirit suffering? And the spirit said, no. Childhood is a necessity. It is natural and corresponds to the design of providence. It is a time of repose for the spirit. So the spirits are saying here that no, in childhood the spirits don't suffer, because just because the organs aren't completely ready yet doesn't mean that the spirit is suffering, because they have to go through this. And it's while this transformation is happening, the spirit is like settling in. It's like if it's moving to a new house. It's settling in, and it's figuring out where everything is, where everything goes, and it's getting ready, and then eventually, you're used to the house, and now it's just your house, and you don't have to remember where you put things because you know exactly where they are. So childhood is just this progression. It's just this transition of moving from one place to another, let's say. But it's a necessity, and it happens to all of us, and the spirit isn't suffering when this happens. Question 383. What is the usefulness of a spirit having to go through childhood? So they're saying, so why is this useful to have this childhood? And the spirit said, a spirit incarnates in order to perfect itself. During childhood, it is more accessible to the impressions it receives, and which may assign it in its progress. Persons in charge of its education should contribute towards this goal. So what they're saying here is that, spirits, all of us, we're trying to become perfect. We're trying to get to that state of perfection. So during childhood is when you are able to change the most and learn the most, and you become really the people around you influence you a lot. So that's why they're saying here that the people who are in charge of educating you, they're also working to this goal, to trying to make you perfect, trying to get you to this perfection, because childhood is the easiest place to help correct some mistakes and to help you guide you in the right direction so that you can work towards this goal of perfection. Question 384. Why are a child's first impressions those of crying? So why is when a child born, why do they cry? And the spirit said, to incite the mother's interest and ensure the care it needs. You don't understand that if it only expresses joy while still unable to speak, few would be concerned about its needs. Therefore, you ought to admire the wisdom of providence in everything. So, why is it that children cry? And why is that the first thing they do? Why do they cry before they know how to talk? So the Spirit said, it's to get the mother interested. Because think about it, if you needed food, but if you just sat there, and you sat there, and you sat there, no one would really worry about you. Because you just sat there and you were happy all the time, so people would forget to change you and they'd forget to feed you. But when the baby cries, when the child cries, then people pay attention and they help. Especially since you can't express yourself and you can't speak yet. Question 385. What is the reason for the change that occurs in its character at a certain age, particularly upon leaving adolescence? Is it the spirit that changes? So they're saying here, so why is it that the character of the spirit, the character changes at a certain age? So they're saying, is it the spirit that's changing? Like say when you're leaving adolescence, when you're leaving being a teenager. So why is there this change in character when you turn a certain age? And the Spirit says, it is because the Spirit recaptures its true nature and reveals who it really was prior to its present incarnation. You do not know the secrets that children conceal behind their innocence. You do not know what they are, what they have been, or what they will be. Nevertheless, you love and cherish them as though they were a part of you. This happens to such a degree that the love of a mother for her child is reputed to be the greatest love that one being may have for another. Why do even strangers feel sweet affection and display tender benevolence towards a child? Do you know? No? Well, I will explain it to you. So this answer goes on for a few paragraphs, so we'll split it up here and talk about what it said so far. So they're saying that once the spirit reaches a certain age, especially when they're done growing, then the spirit, it's getting its true nature. It's remembering kind of parts of its spirit life and who it was before. Not exactly oh, I had this life and I did this and this and this, but the memories of those things, subtle impulses and instincts that you have, are coming back to you. And that's what they're saying here, that children have secrets and they're kind of all covered by this innocence because they haven't learned yet, they don't know yet. But then when that innocence kind of fades and now you know more things, then those memories and those instincts are coming back to you. Then the spirits continue. Children are beings whom God has sent into a new existence, so that God is not accused of excessive servility. God gives them all appearances of innocence. Even in children of an evil nature, their misdeeds are covered up because they are unaware of the quality of their actions. However, this innocence does not truly reflect the state of advancement in relations to what they previously were. In reality, it is a picture of what they ought to be, and if they are not, the blame falls on them alone. So they're kind of saying here that, to be fair, God makes all the children seem innocent and kind so that they have this chance to grow and to learn and to get, like we were saying before, to get guided on the direction for perfection. So all the children are given this chance so that they can be educated and go towards the right path. Even if in their past they were very evil and they did lots of bad things, hopefully they're getting the education to kind of start pushing them into the right direction. So it's kind of helping the spirit to show what the spirit should be doing and how it should behave. And if they don't behave like that, then it's really their fault because other people were trying to help them and they were supposed to grow and try and develop what they were learning. But if they don't, then that blame falls on them. And then the spirits continue. Nevertheless, it is not merely for the children's sake that God give them such an appearance. It is also, and especially for their parents, whose love is necessary in their fragility. Such love would be extraordinarily weakened if the parents were faced with the quarrelsome and bad-tempered character. On the other hand, suppose their child to be good and gentle. Parents give them all their affection and surround them with the tenderest care. However, when children no longer need the protection and assistance that has been given to them for 15 or 20 years, their true and individual character emerges in all its nakedness. Their character remains good if it was fundamentally good in the first place, but it will always display nuisances that were hiding during early childhood. So they're saying that, but just like we were saying before, how it might have been for the child's sake, for them to be all seemed innocent so that they can be on the right track, it's also for the parents. Because if, since day one, the child is terrible and bad and doing wrong things, then the parents might not feel the strength in their love would be weakened. So when the children are good and gentle and they're adorable and everyone has this passion and this love towards them, and it helps the parents to help the child to get in this right direction. But then the parents can only guide the child so far that eventually the child has to start making its own decisions and living its own life, and that's when these remembrances of the past come back. And we're saying it's not like specifically, oh, in the past I did this and this and this, but your tendencies and what your instincts are telling you to do go back to the spirit, not just only what the parents are saying. And then the spirits continue. You can see that God's ways are always the best, and that when one has a pure heart, they are easily explained. In fact, ponder the possibility that the spirit of the child who is born among you may have come from a world on which it has acquired altogether different habits. How would you want this new being to remain in your midst with passions so diverse from yours, inclinations and tastes entirely opposite to yours? How would you want it to incorporate itself into your environment except in the way God wanted it to? That is, after having experienced the sieve of childhood. In this phase are mixed all the thoughts, all the characteristics, and all the varieties of beings generated by that multitude of work on which individuals develop. Upon dying, you yourself will also be in a sort of childhood in the midst of new family members. In your new non-terrestrial existence, you will be ignorant of the habits, the customs, and the form of relationships of that world, and you will have difficulty in managing a language you are not used to speaking, a language more alive than you thought is today. So here they're kind of giving us an example to think about. So think about if this spirit is coming from a completely different world, where they did completely different things and had completely different habits, and everything was completely different. If the spirit didn't have this childhood, this time to adapt, to learn the things of this culture, of this family, of this world that it was on, if it didn't have this, it would be really difficult for the spirit to just jump into a new place and have to deal with all this change, all these changes all at once. And they are also comparing that when you're dying and you're going back to the spirit world, this childhood almost happens again, because all these family members that you have in the spirit world, you didn't see them for a while. So now it's like you're having all this new family members again and a new language. And so they're kind of showing how it kind of happens going the opposite way as well. And then the spirits continue. Childhood provides yet another purpose. Spirits only enter corporeal life in order to improve and purify themselves. The fragility of the early years render them flexible and accessible to the counsel of experience and to those who should aid their progress. That is the time when one can best reform their character and curb their evil tendencies. Such is the duty that God entrusts to parents, a sacred mission for which they will have to answer. So here we're going back to the part that the spirit is working to improve itself, to get better. And in childhood, it's the easiest time to kind of change someone's thoughts, change someone's instincts. So if you're more inclined to do evil things, during childhood is when you'll be able to really engrave it in their brains. Okay, you do the right thing, do this, do this, do this, and kind of lean them towards the path to get to that perfection. And this is not on the spirit, but this is also a big mission for the parents. The parents have this mission to educate the child in the early years so that the spirit can improve itself and really try and get better. And then the spirits continue. Consequently, childhood is not only useful, necessary, and indispensable, but it is also the natural result of the laws that God has established and which govern the universe. So here they concluded by saying that childhood, it's useful, it's necessary, it's indispensable, but also it's the laws that God made that we're born, then we go through these phases, we go through childhood, then we go to adulthood. So this is God's law which govern the universe. And now that's the end of the section about childhood, and now we're moving on to the next part, which is called earthly sympathies and antipathies. And when they're saying sympathies in this case, they mean having like the same vibration, having the same connection, having the same feeling towards one another. So being in harmony or in agreement. And antipathies would be the opposite, would be having different feelings, not in the same harmony, not in the same vibration. Question 386. Could two individuals who have already known and love each other meet in another corporeal existence and recognize each other? So these spirits in one life, they knew each other, they loved each other, then can they come back in another life and recognize each other and be like, hey, I know you? And the spirit said, recognize each other? No. Feel attracted to each other? Yes. Frequently, intimate connections found on sincere affections arise from no other cause. Two individuals are drawn together by apparent fortuitous circumstances, but it is actually the result of the attraction of the two spirits who have been searching for each other amidst the crowds. So here they're saying that they're not going to recognize each other. They're not going to be like, oh, hey, I know you from a past life and I know that we used to love each other. They're not going to say that, but they will feel this attraction to each other because they're going to be in the same harmony. Without knowing it, they're looking for each other. And that's what they're saying, that this connections between people almost always happen because they knew each other in a previous life and they had this vibration, they have this connection. So without really knowing it, they kind of gravitated towards each other. They kind of searched for each other. And then there's the second part to this question, and it says, wouldn't they find great pleasure in being able to recognize each other? So wouldn't they be really happy if they were like, oh, I remember I loved you and all that? And the spirit said, not always. The memory of past lives might hold greater disadvantages than you suppose. After death, they will recognize each other and will remember the time they spent together. So they're saying that it wouldn't always, that sometimes we think that it would be really great if we remembered, oh, in my past life I did this and this and this. And it would be easier to make up for your mistakes, or easier to find people, or easier to get along, or there's so many things that we think that, oh, it would be great if we knew everything about our past lives. But there's a reason that we don't know it. And sometimes it's at a disadvantage. Sometimes because of something we know, we can't move on, we can't improve. So sometimes it's more of a disadvantage than we think, and it's not always the best thing to remember everything. Question 387. Is sympathy always the result of their having known each other previously? The spirit said, no. Two spirits who have affinities naturally search for each other without their having been previously acquainted as incarnates. So what they're saying here is that the question was saying, is sympathy, so this attraction to each other, is it always because they knew each other in the past? So, in my past life I knew you, so now I'm attracted to you and I have this sympathy with you because we knew each other. And the spirit said no, that the spirits can have affinity. They could be attracted to each other without having actually met before. But maybe it's because their characteristics are really similar, or their vibrations or their harmonies, something about them is really similar, so they're being attracted to each other, and maybe this is the first time they're meeting. Question 388. Wouldn't the encounter which sometimes occur between certain persons, and which are attributed to chance, be the effect of a kind of sympathetic relationship? So they're saying sometimes when people just run into each other and they meet each other, and it seems like completely out of the blue, but they get along well, could it be an effect of these sympathetic relationships, of having the same harmony, having the same kind of thoughts, vibrations? And the spirit said, among thinking beings, there are connections that you do not know anything about. Magnetism is at the core of this science, which you will later comprehend better. So they're saying that right now, thinking is one of our connections, but they're saying there's many other connections that we don't know about yet. And like they said, right now, like magnetism, we don't have the knowledge of this right now, and we're not really ready for it. We won't really understand it right now. So later on, we will comprehend more about this connection and other connections besides just thinking. Question 389. Where does the instinctive repulsion come from where certain individuals meet each other for the first time? So now they're asking the opposite. They're asking, so how about when people meet each other for the first time and they hate each other, they despise each other? So what about then? And the spirit said, they are empathetic spirits who perceive and recognize each other without ever having spoken to each other. So they're spirits in different vibrations. They're not in the same harmony. They have completely different thoughts, completely different vibrations, and without really talking or even knowing the person, they can already feel that they're at different levels and that they're not working together well. Question 390. Is instinctive antipathy always a sign of an evil nature? So, when you instinctively don't get along with someone, is it always evil? And the spirit said, two spirits are not necessarily evil just because they are not sympathetic. Antipathy may originate from a dissimilitude in the way of thinking. As they evolve, however, these shades of dissimilarity are erased, and the antipathies disappear. So just because they don't get along doesn't mean that they're evil, and it may just arise from that they don't think the same way, so they don't get along as well, or they're just not similar in character, so they don't get along as well. So that's where we'll leave off today, and we'll finish talking about the sympathies and the antipathies next week. But before we leave off today, I'd like to read our message from the Daily Book of Positive Quotations for today's date, August 22nd. This one's titled, Today. Yesterday is ashes, tomorrow wood. Only today does the fire burn brightly. We are here, right now, in the middle of today. We have many wonderful memories of the past, and we have hopes for what will happen in the future. But today, we are living. I will not let today slip by without living it as fully as I can. If you all have any questions for me at all, or any comments, suggestions, anything at all, please feel free to email me at kardecradioforteens@gmail.com, and I'll get back to you right away. This has been Kardec Radio for Teens. Thank you all for listening.